And we are live with today's SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. This is our study group pre-show. So you can tell already I'm not quite with the program yet. I'm still getting things together. We got about 10 minutes before we get started. This is why we have a pre-show, so I can listen into myself. I can look at my cameras and make sure everything looks good there. We can look at our streaming statistics, which look fantastic. They are all stats are nominal. We've got a streaming piece over here that looks good. That's running. I've already done the podcast intro, so we got that done. I guess I could put up the link. There it is, to the study group answer page. This is also the study group ask a question page. So from that same link, you can ask a question for the second hour, or you can answer the questions that I will be asking in the live stream. And we've got, of course, a little question you can answer right now. We've got our virtual pin up, our map up. You can put your virtual pin into our virtual map. We got a little bit of everything here. Hey, chat room. Hope everybody's doing well. Do I send printed books to Europe? I ship anywhere I can ship these days. I guess even Canada, which is a bit of a problem these days. But yes, we ship anywhere in the world. No problem there. In the case of Europe, we end up, I think we print, for those particular folks, we print them in Europe and we just ship them locally. So it helps a little bit with the shipping price, but only a little bit. It's so difficult to ship internationally. Everybody wants a little bit of a cut when you start getting outside of your local country. And I guess there is a challenge there. They're obviously getting things from one country to another, have a whole series of challenges associated with it. So it makes sense that there would be additional costs associated with it. Sometimes those costs are super surprising. It was really, really something to have that. Oh boy, we've got a lot to go through, at least in here as we're stepping through this. I think we do have free questions. Some folks in the chat room are going, can we get practice questions for free? I wouldn't call them practice questions, but they are pretty good see where you are type questions. We have a weekly pop quiz question that we do, and all those pop quiz questions are archived on our website. You can get one in your email. You can check the Facebook. You can do all those things and do all of that. Anonymous 305, which I'm assuming would be South Florida, saying congrats on 1 million subs. How about that? Thank you so much for the congratulations. We hit 1 million subscribers on our YouTube channel yesterday. I was at dinner with my family and we popped open the stats and there it was. It was very exciting. It's so nice. It is we never really try to farm YouTube subscriptions. That's not the point of what we are doing with this. My perspective of this has always been, if you're going to make something that is valuable, if you're going to make something that people need, if you fill a particular perspective or goal for what people are trying to do, then all of those statistics sort of make their own way. That it's more of a description of how you have done rather than you pushing to get people to get to a certain number. Because 1 million subscribers on YouTube it's just a ridiculous number. I can't even figure out how that exactly happened, but it's something that gives us motivation. Like, well, this is great. So what we're doing is working. Now we didn't have to get to the million mark to know that. We've been watching these numbers for years and years and years and years. It's an important piece of feedback that we use, but it is kind of nice to hit that big round number. And a lot of people look at that number as, oh, okay, so I guess it is all right to do that. It's good. That's good information then. It can't be horrible if there's 1 million people subscribed, kind of thing, which I think is an accurate description. It is not horrible. That is, I'm glad I was able to put that into perspective for everybody. I should make that my tagline. The least horrible training materials you can find. I don't know if that's really the marketing we want to do with that. But we're very proud of that number. We're very happy about that number. We are, it is very gratifying to see that number. We started this as a way to kind of fill the gaps that were on the internet. There just wasn't enough training. And I really think that we're probably in the same place. There are still big gaps of knowledge that still are not covered on the internet. So we still have more work to do, and we will continue to do that. It's really just another one of those things where we can celebrate for a day or two, and then we keep doing this. Well, case in point, we keep doing this. We keep doing live streams. So we've got about 4 minutes and 20 seconds or so, 15 or 20 seconds till we get started. I'm watching the timer. Let's do a quick check. You can kind of see our Cylons going at the bottom right. That's my video recording system, my HyperDecks from Blackmagic Design. They are recording the audio and video of this live stream. There are actually two of them. You can't really see both of them. You really just see one of them spinning around. There's another one just above it. You can sort of see the image of the light going by. But that's good. Okay. Everything looks good here. I think we're in pretty good shape. I got my graphics are right. There's all these little checklists that I have to go through in my head. So we'll figure that out. So thank you so much for the 1 million. Thank all of you for the 1 million subscribers. This is, it's not something I did. It's something that you did. And it's very nice for you to give us that type of feedback to say, that's good enough that we're going to subscribe to that channel. And we think others should too. So thank you. We're not done. We got more to do. So it's going to be a great year. We're already planning. We have already planned 2025. So we'll get there. Did I get my YouTube gold play button? I have not. I have not even put in my, here's the thing about owning a business that you need to know about. You're expecting any moment for the entire thing to fall down and completely. So we saw the 1 million number, and I'm waiting for it to go back down to 999. And so it took me a number of hours. Okay, we really did make 1 million. Although occasionally YouTube will come through and pull thousands of subscribers off of a channel because they do a cleaning up on their end. So it's very possible we could go back down into the 900s. But right now, we're just going to enjoy it and have fun with it. And we're all going to just enjoy it together. I think that's the fun part of it. So that's certainly the piece of this. Yeah, I guess we're coming up on the look back on 2024. Let's look back. But I don't do much of those things. Will I ever do a Linux Plus training series? I started a Linux Plus training series many years ago. Quite a while. And it just did not take the Linux user community. I don't think knew what to make of it. It just wasn't a good fit into this. I think now we're at a better place where something like Linux Plus would be a little more, I don't know if the word is accepted or expected or whatever it happens to be, but I think it would work better today than it did in the past. I just don't think anyone was ready for it at the time. But I don't know. Linux Plus is on my list. Microsoft stuff's on my list. Cisco stuff is on my list. Red Hat stuff is on my list. Almost any cloud-based thing is on my list. You know, if it's interesting and there are people that need to learn it to get a job or get a better job, then that fits our particular goal and objective, because that's what we're trying to do, is to get there, is to find everything you need to get there. Oh, I like the description of a manta ray mouse, because that's really what it is. It does look just like a manta ray, doesn't it? They call it a hand shoe mouse, but I think it's made in the Netherlands. So maybe they don't know what a manta ray is. Certainly they have manta rays in the Netherlands, right? It is a very comfortable mouse because your whole hand fits on top of it. I love it. If you want to know more about all of these things that you see here, we have a page, professormesser.com/studio. There's also a link on the main homepage, and it is super comfy. I love this mouse. It's the worst gaming mouse you could ever hope for because it's so huge that it takes forever to move it. It's too big. But if you're sitting here all day and you're writing content, and you're building videos, and you're doing live streams, it's perfect. Speaking of perfect, it's time to get started. It's a perfect stopping point. We're going to bring up our Keynote. Hello, Keynote. We're going to ask Keynote to give me a green light. We got one. There it is. That looks good. This looks good. Now, let's get started, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the December 2024 Professor Messer SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I put together questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and then we get to see how well you do with answering those questions. We have a lot to go through today. I have all brand new questions for the Security Plus exam, and it's our last Security Plus study group of the calendar year 2024. Can you believe it? If you are here live, first, thank you for being here. Thank you, chat room, for hanging out with us in the pre-show, and thank you for joining us on the live stream. I want to give you instructions on how you can join us and answer those questions live. All you need to do is pop open a new browser window and head over to this link right here. That link is professormesser.com/QA. That is the link that will get you to the questions and allow you to answer them online. And then we have a lot of fun finding out whether we know this content or whether we really, really don't, which usually is how I start things when I'm working through this. For example, there is, and by the way, before we do this question, I will give you a reminder of our standing rules for answering these questions. You want to answer the question by following the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. And I have a question for you. This is the only question that you will see today that you may have seen before. It's a question from last month, and we're going to see if we're able to get in and answer this question using the link that is on your screen. The question is, a company assigned an MSA. Which of the following would be the most likely next step? Would it be to perform a tabletop exercise, hire a third party for professional services, move the data center to a disaster recovery site, increase the throughput of the company's primary internet link, or no public comments about the contents of this document? So we're going to see how well you do with this question. We will come back to this question in just a moment. Remember, if you want to be able to answer this question, no answers in the chat room, follow the link that is on your screen. Please go to professormesser.com/QA to answer that particular question. Well, thank you so much for joining us this month. We do one of these study groups every month for Security Plus. And of course, when we are not here live, you can watch our entire Security Plus training course. It is on YouTube. There's nothing that's behind a paywall. You don't have to register to see it. You simply visit our YouTube page at professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have a weekly Security Plus pop quiz question. You may want to subscribe to our Q&A email to be able to get that. But we also put those questions out on the service formerly known as Twitter. You can find us there at professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/X. We also have the same question, but with the pretty picture, over on Instagram. You can find that at professormesser.com/Instagram. And of course, we also have pages on YouTube, pages on LinkedIn, and other places. If you ever want to find us there, just type in professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find us. And if we are there, you'll find us. And if we're not there, you probably won't find us there. That's the part that gets me. But if we're not somewhere, let me know, because maybe we do want to be there. And that's always the first clue for me, is you've told me, hey, why aren't you over there? And then we can build something out there. Today, we're going to do questions that come directly from the SY0-701 version of the Network Plus exam. This exam was released on November the 7th of 2023, which means it's just over a year old. This is a relatively young exam because these exams tend to stick around for about 3.5 years. So that means the estimated retirement for this exam is May of 2027. That means if you're here at the end of 2024 and you're studying for the Security Plus and everything you're studying from is marked SY0-701, you're studying from the right materials. Make sure everything you're studying from specifically says SY0-701. It's going to be relatively important for you. It's a single exam. You unfortunately don't have to pass multiples of these. It's a 90-minute exam. You get a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions on your exam. And the passing score you're looking for is on a scale from 100 to 900, and the number you're looking for is a 750 as the passing score. If you are familiar with previous versions of this exam, the one just before this was the 601. It is the same format and the same grading and effectively the same configuration as the 701. So nothing unusual there, which means it is a mixture of different kinds of questions. You will have multiple choice-based questions, and you will also have a type of question known as a performance-based question. We'll talk a little bit more, just a bit, about what a performance-based question happens to be. Now, of course, there is a lot of content on our YouTube channel. You can go out there and find all of our videos, but sometimes you need a little bit extra to help study. We have course notes, we have practice exams, we have downloadable versions of all of these videos. We have these videos in an audio format. We have much more. You can find it on our website in our Success Bundle. That is something that you'd be interested in. It certainly helps support what we're doing here. You can find this at professormesser.com/701SB. And later on, we'll look at some of the course notes and practice exams and see if it's something that might be good for you. Now, the replay of this video will be available on YouTube immediately after we're done. I hit the stop button and it magically appears over on the YouTube side. The other thing that you might want is something you might want to have in a podcast format, in an audio format that you can listen to when you're in the car or you can listen to when you're working out. That's something that's available over on our podcast page at professormesser.com/podcast. or simply search for Professor Messer on your favorite podcast index. If you prefer using a real-time streaming audio service like Spotify, simply search for Professor Messer on Spotify, and you'll find our podcast is listed there as well. About a day after this live stream is over, you'll also find that the YouTube video description has been updated with specific timestamps so that you can find the exact information you are looking for. And you'll notice this goes back 4 years. This is something that is not automatic or magic. It's my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. She's watching this replay right now, probably at 2x speed, hopefully at 2x speed. And she is putting all of these timestamps in for you. So if you have ever used these timestamps to jump around our study groups and find exactly what you need, you can thank Lori for that one. And you can always put your thanks in the chat room too. I'm sure she sees the chat replay go by whenever she is watching the replay of these. So that is another thing that might help as well. When we are not doing one of these live streams, I have a lot that I'm working on, but I always have my Discord up right here in the studio. This is our chat and study community where we have thousands of people on this community that are studying for their A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and other IT certifications. There's also a lot of very smart people in there that have already earned their certifications, and they just hang out to take their knowledge and help others find their way through these certifications. I love that part of the community. And if you'd like to be part of that, we'd love for you to join. You can find it over on our Discord at professormesser.com/discord. Eventually, you will need to take the Security Plus exam. And if you are in the US or Canada, I would love to give you a voucher that is discounted so that you're not paying full price for the voucher that you would normally get on the CompTIA website. You can go to professormesser.com/vouchers and not only get a voucher that has been discounted, but you can also get a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that I do not sell. I wrote a list of all of the tips and tricks that I have used through the years to study for these certification exams and take these certification exams, which means I have hints inside of this book that can help you during the exam itself. There's always a strategy. There's always a best way to do things. And I try to document this in my Exam Hacks ebook. You can get the Exam Hacks ebook. The only place you can get the Exam Hacks ebook is if you purchase a voucher from my site or you've purchased one of our success bundles. It's not sold separately. So a little bit of exclusivity for you that are getting the vouchers from our site or getting the success bundle from our site. If you'd like to know more about those, they're at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's now go back to that question we looked at earlier, and it was, a company has signed an MSA. Which of the following would be the most likely next step? Would it be to perform a tabletop exercise, hire a third party for professional services, move the data center to a disaster recovery site, increase the throughput of the company's primary internet link, or no public comments about the contents of the document? We're going to stop our poll right there. And we did so much better this month than we did last month. We actually got a majority of you, 55% of you, say the answer is to hire a third party for professional services. Now, that is a very strong showing. We have 16% of you that said no public comments about the contents of the document, 14% said to perform a tabletop exercise, and then 6% apiece say to move the data center to a disaster recovery site and increase the throughput of the company's primary internet link. There are a number of common agreements that you need to remember on your Security Plus exam. One of these is called a Master Service Agreement, or MSA. Aha, that sounds familiar. That's exactly the type of agreement that is listed in this as the company signing an MSA. This is an agreement that contains all of the well-negotiated terms of an agreement between two organizations. We see this very often when one organization needs to obtain a number of professional services from another organization. Maybe there are multiple services that need to be done. Maybe we need to do professional services at different times of the year, but we only want to negotiate the terms one time. That way we can have a full configuration set up where we have the trust in place. We know how much it's going to cost. We know what the hourly rate might be. There's plenty to go through here. The MSA is usually combined with a statement of work, an SOW, or a work order is often compared. Usually those are the same thing, or at least we use the same terms there. So we have a master service agreement we spend months working on, and finally everyone signs. And then as we need things done, we can simply just create a work order. And everybody knows the terms that are in place. The work order simply has a list of the details of that particular position. So that's something that might help you as you're going through the idea of looking at common agreements on this exam. And also, I'll remind you, that comes from section 5.3. I have a video called Agreement Types, and that is the agreement types for this. There are other agreements in that particular presentation that you do need to know. Of course, they come directly from the exam objectives. So hiring a third party for professional services, that is exactly why we spent all this time signing a master service agreement, because now we need to get those professional services folks in to perform services for us. The 55% of you got that one absolutely correct. There are other options on here. 16% said no comments about the contents of the document. Anytime there's that level of confidentiality associated with the document that you've signed or something that you've seen, or just things you've talked about in a meeting, that's usually a non-disclosure agreement or an NDA. So not the same type of agreement that we have here. The Master Service Agreement, or MSA, I guess it does have an A in the name, but a very different one for a non-disclosure agreement. We do have performing a tabletop exercise. Master Service Agreement has nothing to do with performing a tabletop exercise for security, where we get all the key players around a table and we talk about what we would do if a particular scenario occurred. Increasing the throughput of the primary link for your internet connection is not related to a Master Service Agreement. Normally, that would just be part of an upgrade or standard contract with your internet service provider. And lastly, moving the data center to a disaster recovery site, that wouldn't normally be part of a master service agreement because there's nothing to do once you've moved everyone. So this is not a situation where you have ongoing contracts or service statements of work that you would create, or work orders. Instead, moving a data center to a disaster recovery site really is not associated with a master service agreement. That leaves us with that single answer, hiring a third party for professional services, and 55% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. I think you remembered a little bit of what we talked about last month, and that does make me very happy to see. And I'm sure a lot of you seeing this one again figured out which direction to go as well. So I think maybe you learned something too along the way with that particular set of topics. Let's now shift gears just a little bit. I want to give you a question that is not a multiple choice question. For those of you familiar with multiple choice, it's just like the question we just saw. There was a question and there were multiple options to choose from. Something that's interesting with this one is that even if you didn't know the answer, in fact, maybe you had no idea what an MSA was and therefore really could not answer this question, you still had a 20% chance of getting it right just by guessing. So if you guessed at the second option, you still got points for that. Now that's part of multiple choice, and we all understand that that's part of using multiple choice on an exam. But CompTIA doesn't want to make it that easy for you. They instead would like to give you some questions that you simply can't guess at. And to be able to do that, they need to present the questions in different ways. There might be a drag and drop question. It might be a fill in the blank question. Maybe they're asking you to put things in a particular order. Maybe it's a matching question. There are a lot of different ways to ask questions of you. The important thing to remember, though, with a performance-based question is that all of these topics on the performance-based questions all come from the official exam objectives. So don't worry so much about how they're asking the question. As long as you know the exam objectives, you will be able to answer this. So a lot of people get very concerned about performance-based questions. You do not need to. If you know the content, you're going to do just fine on the performance-based questions. I have for you today, as I do with every study group, a new performance-based question that we can step through. The performance-based question of the month that we have is this one that asks, match the best technology to each description. And you can see here that there's a number of technologies and a number of descriptions to go through. Notice also that there are more technologies than there are descriptions. So it's a little bit different on one side than the other. That means it's not a one-to-one match. There will be some technologies left over at the end. And by the way, that is an interesting method that they use on the CompTIA exams just to keep you on your toes. Let's step through each one of these. The technologies that we will be discussing are DLP server, jump server, VPN concentrator, UPS, load balancer, NGFW, and proxy server. Now, for each of those technologies, I want you to consider each one of them and match one of them to one of these four descriptions. The first one is, a lightning storm has disrupted the local power grid. Which technology would you match to that one? The second description is, a company blocks any applications using Microsoft SQL protocols. The third on this list is, make a configuration change to a Linux service from a remote site. And lastly, maintain uptime if a web server power supply fails. Those are your four descriptions. I want you to take each of those technologies and match them to the description. Now, if you think that they are already matched, all you have to submit into that link that you see at the bottom of your screen is 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D. That is not how they're matched up, but it's close. Just a little bit off. Maybe you'll be able to figure out which way to go with this. Submit your answers at any time. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Let's see how well you do with each of these four descriptions. Now, while you're doing that on this side, I get to look in to see how you're doing on this side. So I'm looking at these numbers right now to see if I know which ones you would use for this. I think a lot of you are doing very good with the answers that you are submitting, but not everybody is choosing the same answers. So there will be a few here that are a little bit off as we step through this piece. We'll have to figure out which one of these it happens to be. And I like this, Will. A number of you are even putting in more information about where it is. What's interesting about this question also, by the way, is it asks you match the best technology to each description. This will come into play in just a moment. In fact, I'm looking at my list. It won't come into, yes, it will come into play just as much as I thought. Trying to think back when I wrote the question, how did I lay these out? Because sometimes you will run into a question on your exam where the question itself is, you could go one answer or another. You can maybe choose from 1 or 2 or even 3 potential answers that are listed. All of them technically would be correct. But when you look at the question, it clearly says, and this is a very good example of it, match the best technology to each description. So you cannot use the same answer for 2 of these. It's a 1-to-1 relationship, and you need to be able to find which one would be the best one when you're looking at this. So that's another thing to consider. I think that's also a lot of people run into challenges when they're working through these exams of figuring out what do you mean by best. And on the exam, and what I've really found on the exam, is that what is best is often very, very obvious that it's the best one. And I think in this answer, you will find that is the case as well. Let's now step through each one of these descriptions and let's see what I put down for each one of these. See if it matches what you put down for these. So we'll start with the very first one that says a lightning storm has disrupted the local power grid. I'm in the state of Florida. We get lightning storms all the time, especially during the summer months. And we are very, very sensitive to this because it's so easy to lose all of your power whenever there is a lightning storm. Lightning strike will hit, it will damage a portion of the grid, and it will take down a certain section of the power in that particular area. Well, as you're painfully aware, the computers that we use, they really, really like power. They really, really need that power to operate. And so we are sensitive in our data centers that we have enough power to keep things running. We can't afford an outage of some kind during a lightning storm and a disruption of the local power grid. So we need make our own power. We need our own power generating system within our data center. Sometimes we use generators for this, but the generator only kicks in after the power goes out. It waits about 15 seconds or so to make sure the power really did go out completely. And then the generator kicks in and it spins itself up. It gets the voltages going. And then finally, once it's up and running in approximately 30 to 60 seconds after that, it moves everything over onto the generator and using that power. So already 2 minutes have gone by. And we all know that once our computers turn off, we're going to have to restart everything. So generators are not the best option. Instead, we need something that can give us immediate power so that there's no outage whatsoever. And that would be an uninterruptible power supply, a UPS. That is the technology that has batteries inside of it. It is connected to our systems. In some cases, the UPS is constantly providing power to our computers. And if we lose power, there's really nothing even to switch over. It just continues to provide that power using the battery backup. The other piece of it is that the UPS itself may be set up to always run on main power. And if that power goes out, it switches over to battery. So there are different types of UPS systems. Make sure you're familiar with the differences associated with those. And that might help you as you're going through the process of trying to determine what type of technology do we put in to protect this. Next on our list is a company blocks any applications using Microsoft SQL protocols. This is something very specific. We're not blocking based on a port number. We're not blocking based on an IP address range. We're not even blocking based on a particular user. If we see any traffic going across our network and it's communicating using the standard protocols associated with Microsoft SQL Server, then we need to block it using a next generation firewall, an NGFW. A next generation firewall is built to understand applications. It operates at layer 7 of the OSI model. So if you are looking at your network, your next generation firewall will already understand what the differences are between Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL traffic, maybe an Oracle SQL Server. Those are 3 different SQL servers, but a next generation firewall can tell the difference between all 3 of those. Even if they all use the same port numbers, even if they're all communicating over the same IP addresses, next generation firewalls is a very good way to prevent certain types of applications or even modes of applications from traversing your network. Next on the list is make a configuration change to a Linux service from a remote site. One of the best ways to do that is on that list is through a jump server. A jump server is designed to be a front end to a site that would then allow us to jump to multiple systems inside of that site in order to be able to manage them. This is something commonly set up when we're either remote to a particular site, or perhaps we have a third party like a managed service provider, an MSP. And the managed service provider is responsible for keeping those systems up and running, for monitoring those systems, for telling us if there's any alarms or alerts. So they need access to those systems. And a great way to do that is to use a jump server. So you go to a single server that is usually something that is very well protected. Often there are multiple forms of authentication required for that. Lots of things to consider when you are working in a very secure environment. And then once you get access to that jump server, you have access to the individual systems inside of that company. So very useful to have that there. Next on our list and last on our list is the technology that's looking to maintain uptime if a web server power supply fails. This is our second question dealing with power, but this power is a little bit different. This is power that is on our local system. It's on the back of a computer. If we have a problem with that power supply, and that's the only power supply in the system, then obviously that computer is going to be down, and that any service running on that computer, for example, a web server, is also going to be down. So that does create a little bit of a problem for working through the details of understanding how to prevent that from occurring. Well, we can then add a load balancer to the mix. In fact, if you visit the Professor Messer website, you've also passed through a load balancer because I have multiple web servers. And if I happen to turn one of those web servers off, I reboot the web server, I make an update to that machine and want to reboot it, everybody now moves to the only server that's available. And if I want to build up multiple servers at the same time, I can have even more redundancy available. And certainly a load balancer is a good choice for that. Now, some folks were looking at the first question, which was a lightning storm disrupting the local power grid, and a second one, maintaining uptime if a web server power supply fails. If you lose the power grid, you've also lost the load balancer. So that's why load balancer would not fit into the first description. And secondly, the UPS would not fit into the last description, because if you lose the power supply inside of an individual device, you can't plug in a UPS, you can't plug in a secondary power source, you've lost your power supply. There's no way to get power into that particular system. So a very good example of how you would use different components depending on what you were trying to do in the meantime. Now that means, of course, we did not choose DLP server, VPN concentrator, or proxy server for these. DLP server, we really did not have a choice here. That is a data loss prevention server. There's also software that you could run that provides data loss prevention. This is software or hardware that's designed to look for particular types of sensitive data. Maybe it's PII, maybe it's social security numbers, maybe it's credit card numbers, and it's looking for that to traverse the network. And if it sees that on the network, it will block it before that information moves across. You also have a scenario with VPN concentrators. VPN concentrator is used to be the endpoint of where everyone connects to when they're coming into your organization over a VPN client. VPN concentrator is widely used very often these days. The VPN concentrator is also built into your next generation firewall. And there's a lot of functionality within a next-gen firewall. That is a very good example of how some organizations are combining both the firewall, the IPS, the VPN concentrator, and more inside of a single security appliance. And then lastly, we have a proxy server. Proxy server is really the only one that I could have potentially seen somebody switch out for option B. Proxy servers, and at least some proxy servers, do tend to have some level of application visibility, but it's usually not very good. And in this case, a much better technology to use for that particular description by far is a next generation firewall. They are much more effective. They have many more functions associated with them. They can look for many, many, many more applications than a proxy server can. And they don't have the same limitations, efficiency problems, and scalability issues that a proxy server might have either. These days, we're throwing out our proxy servers. We're replacing them with next-gen firewalls, a much more secure and faster form of security. So hopefully that gives you a perspective of what you would find. The answers again for a lightning storm disrupting the local power grid is a UPS. A company blocking applications using the Microsoft SQL protocols would be a next generation firewall. Making a configuration change to a Linux service from a remote site would be a jump server. And maintaining uptime if a web server power supply fails would be a load balancer. Now, some of you are asking in this particular chat, if you got some of these correct, would you get partial credit? Well, CompTIA does have a frequently asked questions file on their website where they document the answer to this. And they say that performance-based questions could have some type of extra partial credit added to it. Not extra, but partial credit added to it. So there's your scenario, is that whenever you're working through and trying to determine, did I get partial credit? CompTIA says you might, but we're not going to tell you if you do. So I'm not sure the answer really helps very much. All we can do is really hope. And I think in this particular example, we would hope you would get partial credit, but it's not guaranteed. It may be an all or nothing. And ultimately, you're never going to know that answer anyway, because CompTIA does not share their grading for each individual exam. In fact, they don't tell you much about grading overall. We know very little about the grading process for these exams. So although we can speculate about what the answer might be or what they might do from a grading perspective, ultimately, we don't know the answer, and we will never know the answer. It's a mystery of the universe that we will never, ever figure out. But that's okay. As long as you know the content, we will get other questions right, and that won't even matter in the big picture. We're going to pass our exam anyway. That is your performance-based question of the month. Let's do some multiple choice-based questions and keep things going. This next question asks, a company stores all of the cryptographic keys for their data center in a centralized and hardened system. Which of the following would best describe this system? Would it be TPM, proxy, IPS, HSM, or secure enclave? A company stores all of the cryptographic keys for their data center in a centralized and hardened system. Which of the following would best describe this system? Is it TPM, proxy, IPS, HSM, or secure enclave? If you think you know the answer, please go to the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll see how well we know this one and working through the details. That last question, when I put together the question with power, I did want to have at least some of the questions have similar technologies associated with them so that we ourselves can understand in what case would you use an IPS or a UPS versus some other type of technology. So we really do focus on drilling down into the details and really differentiating between those different technologies, because you will run into those technologies when you start working with these data centers and other services that you will be using. You're building things out in the cloud. You may want to have some load balancers, and people might ask, why do I need a load balancer? Well, now you know at least one reason why a load balancer might be useful, even when you have a backup power system for the entire data center. So that can give you an idea of what those options are. A lot of people locking in their answers here. I wonder if that's because we really, really know it or we really, really don't. We'll find out in a moment. Let's see how you did. The question asks, a company stores all of the cryptographic keys for their data center in a centralized and hardened system. Which of the following would best describe this system? Would it be a TPM, proxy, IPS, HSM, or secure enclave? Let's see what you answered. We'll stop the poll. And you can see that 51% of you say the answer is HSM. We have 37% of you that say secure enclave, 8% say TPM, and then less than a percent for IPS and for proxy. You can see the majority of you, the 52% or so of you, chose HSM as the option that you would use to store your cryptographic keys in a centralized and hardened system. And indeed, if you're in a data center, you will probably see an HSM sitting there in the rack. It probably won't even look like an HSM. You won't even know that that particular device happens to be one of those. But that is exactly what one would look like. We can see it here. It's just a server that's sitting in the rack, and it usually has redundant HSMs. Those redundant HSMs very commonly will have redundant power supplies. They might be connected to different subnets. So this is a pretty important server. This is a very important server where you can store a huge amount of cryptographic information. Imagine a data center where you have hundreds or thousands of web servers, and each one of those servers has their own cryptographic keys associated with it. You need some way to manage all of those keys from one central place, some place where you could store them and not have to worry that somebody might gain access to that very, very important and sensitive security information. Those keys are critical. We have to protect those. And we've built the HSM specifically to protect those keys. This is a great place to back up information. It is designed for the enterprise. You're not going to have an HSM in your home. You're not even going to have one in a very small company. You very commonly have a hardware security module in something that is a large organization where you are storing many, many, many keys onto that system and securing them in a very protected way on a hardened system. Well, that is the right answer. That HSM is exactly what we were looking for. And if you answered the hardware security module, you got that one absolutely correct. 37% of you said a secure enclave. If you have a modern laptop, you have a mobile device you carry around. We also are concerned about people gaining access to privacy and keys and encryption information that is on these devices as well. But obviously we can't carry around a big server. We can't carry around this server with us. That doesn't make any sense. So we need some way to be able to protect data that's even on here. So think about being able to take that security idea and shrink it down to the size of an individual chip. That's a security enclave. That's one of the things that we have on our modern devices, so that everything that might be associated with, say, full disk encryption or full storage encryption on this device is all stored in a very specialized security chip called the security enclave. And it is something that you can't access by simply gaining physical access to the phone or the mobile device. You would instead need to know the passphrase or know the way to get in, how to unlock that particular security enclave. And obviously, if you can unlock it, you gain access to all the data on that device. If you cannot unlock it, you will never gain access to the key or anything else that's on that device. That's the whole goal of a security enclave, but that is not where you would store cryptographic keys for your entire data center. It is not a centralized system. It is not a hardened system. I guess it is hardened, but not centralized. So security enclave, very much designed for our mobile devices, laptops, that type of thing. On our desktop computers, laptops, and other devices, it is very important, especially if you've installed the latest version of Windows. You may have noticed that it asked you to install a particular version of a trusted platform module, a TPM. A TPM is, think of it as a little cryptographic processor that's on an individual device. It helps us with the cryptography that we need on our modern devices. So when we do things like full disk encryption, there's a lot of cryptography installed and that requires that is required for full disk encryption. So that TPM gives us local cryptography functionality that normally we would not have available. And it's in the hardware of our local computer. So it is a single device cryptographic processor that also gives us a way to have a verified piece of hardware that has, for better or worse, you can think of it as a serial code, as its own set of keys on that system that can't be changed. So if somebody finds a TPM on a device and it has a particular key on it, you know that that is unique to that particular TPM, which is great if you're trying to verify a machine remotely. This is the challenge you have as a security professional, by the way, is that you may be in one local facility and everybody else might be remote. Well, when somebody connects to your network over the VPN, how do you know it's that person's computer? How do you know it's not somebody spoofing that user from a different country? Well, one of the ways you can do it is to query the TPM that's on that device. And obviously the TPM on that device is going to be very unique. I guess there's no such thing as very unique. It will be unique on that machine. So that's where TPMs are used, and it would not be used as a method of storing cryptographic keys in a data center for hundreds or thousands of systems. We have 2% that said an intrusion prevention system. An IPS is designed to look for known vulnerabilities traversing the network and block those. Our question here had nothing to do with known vulnerabilities or blocking or allowing traffic on your network. And we already talked about what a proxy does, which is effectively sit in the middle of a conversation to be able to analyze, allow, deny, or maintain security for a particular connection. In this case, storing cryptographic keys is certainly not the job of a proxy. Proxies are not hardened systems, although usually they are centralized. I guess they're hardened a little bit, but a proxy itself would not be where we would store our cryptographic keys. That is, in this particular case, the best choice will be a hardware security module, an HSM. And if you were part of the 52% that answered that question, you got it absolutely correct. Let's do another question, shall we? Here's another one. Let me see if I like this question. I do like this question. This is a question for you security folks, because this is something you might run into quite a bit. The security administrator for a power company has identified a series of sophisticated exploits to their internet firewall, all originating from another country. Which of the following would best describe the source of this threat? Would it be insider threat, shadow IT, nation state, false positive, or unskilled? All these terms, of course, come directly from your exam objectives. Let's see if you recognize what this one might be. The security administrator for a power company has identified a series of sophisticated exploits to their internet firewall, all originating from another country. Which of the following would best describe the source of this threat? Would it be insider threat, shadow IT, nation state, false positive, or unskilled? If you think you know the answer, I guess it'd be good if I put the link up for you. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know what the answer happens to be. This is one that you will probably run into at some place along here and understand what the different options are. If you're ever working through the details of trying to understand where to go with something like this, that's where you would absolutely focus your efforts. Another reminder, please, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go directly to the link that's on your screen at professormesser.com/QA. That's your best place to go to lock in your answer. See if you know what the answer might be. This is where we would go. In fact, it's a great place to summarize these as well. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See how you do with this one. A lot of you already locked in your answer. Let's see how you did. You go to this link. The question again asks, the security administrator for a power company has identified a series of sophisticated exploits to their internet firewall, all originating from another country. Which of the following would best describe the source of this threat? Is it insider threat, shadow IT, nation state, false positive, or unskilled? Let's see how you did for the answer. And we can see 89% of you say the answer is nation state. 5% of you say the answer is shadow IT, and then it drops off completely from there to 1% for insider threat, 1% for unskilled, and practically 1% for false positive. That certainly tells a story where 90% of you have answered nation state as what you think the answer would be. This is not an unusual question to find. In fact, I sort of stole the question from some emails I received. I get updates every week from SANS that tells me about all of the major exploits that have been attempted during the week, and they always have interesting stories in there. If you ever want to get some of those emails, simply go over to sans.org. They have some great email list that you can get on, and they will send you that update every week. It's even editorialized. So not only do they report on some of the security events that occur during the week, They also talk about what they think of that particular security event. It's pretty interesting. In this case, the idea of a third party attacking a power company and then using that to be able to perhaps manipulate the power source, the grid for an organization, that is indeed a nation state. We certainly will see that very often. This is an ongoing type of scenario. This is the war that's really going on out there, is that third parties are trying to gain access to the systems and technologies in another country in order to gain access to their resources, be able to disrupt things inside of that country, be able to plant information or steal information from that country. It's something that happens all the time. This is something that can certainly affect large organizations and small organizations. And it's very common to see things like this happen. Another good example of this occurring is what we got with the Stuxnet worm, where the US and Israel got together and destroyed nuclear centrifuges with malware. A remarkable story in itself. And if you're interested in learning more about how this type of nation state attack takes place, go read all about the Stuxnet worm. It's almost like a movie. It's almost like it can't be real. And in fact, it is real and it's happening right now. And it's things that are going on constantly. If we knew about these, imagine the things we don't know about. Nation state is the answer that we were looking for. 90% of you knew that was the right answer. Why would it not be shadow IT? We did have a smattering of you. 5% of you said shadow IT would be what we would use. Shadow IT is the term we give to people within your organization that are not part of the IT department, but they start building out infrastructure in the organization as if they were the IT department, very often to disastrous results because they aren't concerned with security. They're only concerned with access. So they might spin up their own cloud servers and not ask anybody if they can do it or not. They might install their own wireless access points at their desk just to be more convenient, but they don't put any security on the access point. Those types of things happen all the time. So that is a good example of shadow IT, but it doesn't really describe this example where a third party is attacking a system from outside of the organization. And in this case, from outside of the country, that commonly would not be associated with shadow IT. Shadow IT is usually inside of your organization. And if it's somebody who is not just trying to make things easier for themselves by being another part of IT, maybe they're trying to be malicious. And that kind of malicious person on the inside of your company is an insider threat. That is the answer that 2% of you chose in that example. Unskilled would be somebody who really doesn't know what they're doing. Maybe they're just running scripts and they're hoping one of those scripts happens to work. I would say I have been unskilled from my attack perspective for many times. In fact, I'm unskilled all the time. Being able to understand attack types and how to use them takes quite a bit of skill and time and effort to learn them. And just like anything else in IT, you always start out as unskilled and then you learn it and get better. Unskilled attackers, though, never seem to learn anything and they never seem to get better. In this case, somebody attacking a power company, if it's a sophisticated exploit, it probably is not somebody who is unskilled. And then a false positive would be a message we receive saying we're being attacked, but we're not really being attacked. We got a positive verification of an attack. No, it's a false positive, which means it's a false notification of an attack. So the 1% of you that chose that one, not the case in this particular example. Nothing about this question says that the attack was not real. It simply said the attack was a sophisticated exploit to an internet firewall from another country that certainly fits the definition of nation state. And indeed, 90% of you got that one absolutely correct. As you've probably already seen now, you're kind of getting the feel for this. There is a lot of information on the Security Plus exam. We deal with many different topics, not just what type of attackers we might see, but we have other types of devices, cryptographies, understanding processes and procedures, and much more as part of the Security Plus exam. If you looked at my training course, it's a big training course, 121 videos. There's over 15 hours of video content as part of the Security Plus course. And although I would recommend you watch every single one of the videos, that would make me very happy. I realize that not everybody has the time to go through every single one of them. So one of the things that I've done is take all of the information that is in that particular place, that's all in there. What if everything that all of the text from every video was in one document? What if all of the important graphics that were in the course were in a single document? What if you're able to take all of the tables and put them in one document? That's what we've created with our course notes. So if you're looking to find the interesting graphics that we have as part of our courses, you want the tables, you want all of the text from these individual videos, it's in the course notes. This is where you can go in to get a digital version of the course notes. We also have a physical version of the course notes. Here it is. It's exactly the same as the digital content, of course. It's in full color. It is perfect bound, as they say, which is one of the things associated with a softbound book. And this is one that gives you a quality book, not only in a physical form, but if you purchase the physical book, you also get the digital PDF version for free. That's the one that you see on the screen here. So you've got the option to either just get the digital or get the physical and the digital so that you have everything that is from those videos. It's also a great way to support and keep this entire site going. And we thank you so much for those of you that have already purchased the course notes, and thank you for considering it as well. If you'd like to learn more about those, you can find it at professormesser.com/701cn. Let's do another question. This next question asks, a security administrator would like to segment 2 application services into separate broadcast domains. Which of the following would best provide this functionality? Would that be VLANs, 802.1q, containerization, SDN, or virtualization? I guess all of these are really segmentation technologies, but which one would we use? The question again asks, a security administrator would like to segment 2 application services into separate broadcast domains. Which of the following would best describe this functionality? Is it VLANs, 802.1q, containerization, SDN, or virtualization? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that's on your screen, go down here to professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. Should be a good one to step through. A lot of you already locking in your answer. I'm wondering if we know this one. Is this another one where we always know what this happens to be? But there's only one answer for this one. What is it? What could it possibly be? See if you know the difference between all of these. We will talk about the differences between all of these technologies. Once we get your answer locked in at the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA. That'll be a good one to step through. See if you know which one this is. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Follow the link on your screen and lock in your answer right now at professormesser.com/QA. I am mixed between 2 of these as well. See if you know what this one happens to be. This should be a good one for some of you to step through. Let's see how you did. The question again asks, a security administrator would like to segment 2 application services into separate broadcast domains. Which of the following would best provide this functionality? Would that be VLANs, 802.1q, containerization, SDN, or virtualization? Let's stop the poll and let's see how you did. And you can see VLANs got 59, we'll say 60% of the answers. That's a pretty strong showing. We'll come back to VLANs in just a moment. But 19% of you said the answer is containerization is how you would do that. You've got SDN at 11%, virtualization at 7%, and 802.1q at 4%. So a little bit of a difference here in the answers that you provided. 60% of you, though, said VLANs. And if you need to separate a network into multiple broadcast domains, VLANs is a great way to do it. That's effectively the definition of a VLAN, is a separation of the network into separate broadcast domains. We're able to separate out different layer 2 networks into their own area without having to physically separate them. This is a good example of this, where we have a single switch, and on this switch we've defined the first 16 different interfaces on one side. First 12 interfaces are for one customer. The last 12 interfaces, physical interfaces on that switch, are for a different customer. And you can see that those are two separate VLANs. I even put a little separation here so you could really see that everybody who is customer A has no idea that the devices over on customer B even exist. They are physically separated from each other, but they're also logically separated from each other on a single switch. This is one broadcast domain. This is another broadcast domain. The only way you would be able to have those two VLANs communicate to each other is if you put a router in the middle. Sometimes you may see this router as a secondary device, an external device to these two VLANs. Sometimes the router is within the same switch chassis itself. If we have a router that we've somehow embedded inside of the same component, it no longer is a layer 2 switch. We often refer to that as a layer 3 switch to be able to work through it. So that's where you might hear some of those terms from the networking world of this. So that is what the answer is. VLANs is the best way to separate into two separate or many separate broadcast domains. It's exactly what we would use. In this case, however, in this case, 60% of you got that answer, and that is the right answer. That's exactly what we were looking for, was VLANs. For those of you wondering, and those of you familiar with VLANs, you might have seen 802.1q. In the world of networking, we often just abbreviate that as .1q as the type of technology. .1q describes the process that we use for connecting multiple switches together, but still maintaining that VLAN separation through that single link. It is a way to tag different types of data, send it to another switch, untag it on the other side, and put it into the correct VLAN. So if you're connecting multiple switches together and you need to maintain that VLAN separation across multiple switches, you will use the technology known as 802.1q. In this case, we didn't have multiple switches. We just wanted to know, how do we put them in separate broadcast domains? And the best description for that would be a VLAN. We have other technologies here like containerization. I don't think I have a picture of a containerization, but that is where you would have a single operating system, and then applications are layered on top of that operating system into what we call containers. This makes it a very modular way to add a new application to a server or remove applications from a server. Makes it very, very simple because everything is in one single container or group of files, and it makes it very easy and very modular to be able to manage those, which is really perfect for a cloud-based infrastructure. Containerization, though, is on the same system, and it does not by itself provide any segmentation between separate broadcast domains. So that is the big difference. As we are dealing with networking, we have to keep that in mind. I often tell people that a huge foundation of IT security is networking. You have to know a lot about networking in order to properly and safely deploy these security technologies. So when you're talking about a broadcast domain, you're absolutely talking about multiple VLANs, but you are not necessarily talking about multiple containers. We have 7 or 11% said a software-defined network. Software-defined network is certainly a valuable method of separating out functionality of an application so that you can control it, manage it, but still allow the data to flow for that application. It has very wide-ranging uses in the world of cloud technologies, but it also has wide-ranging uses in physical devices as well. Even though we call it SDN, we're really just taking an abstraction of the physical world and putting it into the world of software. But an SDN by itself doesn't segment services into separate broadcast domains. So we would not choose that as what would best describe this functionality. And then virtualization, 7% of you chose that one. A separate VMs, we are very familiar with VM technology these days, but just because something is in a separate VM does not mean it is in a separate broadcast domain. In fact, it could be in the same broadcast domain. In this case, the only one of these technologies that has anything to do with separating things into a separate broadcast domain is indeed the option for VLANs, and 60% of you chose that option. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, which means you probably already have your Security Plus or some other industry certification, and you would like to get an email from me that certifies that you are here for 1 hour of a webinar category CEU, then one of the things you can do is simply follow these instructions to receive that email from me. You would go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. From there, you would choose the link to contact us. Really, I guess that's contact me. That will send me a note. And in that message that pops up, or that form that pops up, please put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put December 2024 Security Plus, so I know where this came from. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, please put the super secret code words of the month: virtualization, containerization, VLANs. Those are your super secret code words of the month. It takes me about a week to process these and get them back to you, sometimes a little faster. I'm going to try to get these back on the weekend since we're getting into the holiday season here. But be patient, I will get these to you. Let me give you those instructions again, because you have to follow the instructions or you will not receive the email. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address. In the subject line, please put December 2024 Security Plus or something close to it so I know what's there. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month: virtualization, containerization, VLANs. That's what I'm looking for. And if you'd like to add anything else to that note, I do read through every single one of these that you send. Because I get so many, I'm not able to respond back personally to all of them. But I do like reading about where you are with your studies, what certifications you have, what this continuing education unit will be used for. Those are also nice to read as well. Please include those if you like, but you don't have to. Just put the super secret code words, send it in. I'll know exactly where to go from there. Do not worry. I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's do some more questions, shall we? I've got another one here we can do. Next on our list is this question, and it asks, which of the following security methods could an application developer use to prevent changes to the software they distribute? Would it be full disk encryption, static code analysis, secure cookies, code signing, or input validation? Got a few things to choose from here. The question again asks, which of the following security methods could an application developer use to prevent changes to the software they distribute? Is it full disk encryption, static code analysis, secure cookies, code signing, or input validation? If you think you know the answer, please answer by using the link at the bottom of your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, go to the link on your screen and lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you know what this one might be. All of these technologies are from your exam objectives. One of the things I often do with my questions is try to fit in something that should look familiar. Now, if you're looking through this and you're not quite sure what one of these topics happens to be, please make a note of it, because you will want to go back to your notes or to the things that you're studying from, and that will help you study up on things that maybe are going to help you during your exam. They are part of your exam objectives, so hopefully that will help you quite a bit. See if you know this one. A lot of you are locking in your answers right now, so maybe this is one you're very familiar with. Maybe you've done some application development. You've used these technologies. Maybe you've installed some applications and you've noticed that it includes this type of technology. I don't know. We'll have to see if this is something that matches up with some of the things that you are familiar with. Let's see how you did. The question asks, which of the following security methods could an application developer use to prevent changes to the software they distribute? Is it full disk encryption, static code analysis, secure cookies, code signing, or input validation. Let's stop the poll and see how you did. 74% of you, a pretty strong number, say the answer is code signing. And then everything else is a smattering all across the way. 10% of you say input validation. 7% of you say full disk encryption. About a tie for that one with 8% that say static code analysis. And then 1% say the answer is secure cookies. I would think secure cookies would be a great thing. It's not only secure, it's cookies, and who doesn't want that? But in this case, it really is not the right answer. Only 1% of you chose that one. You knew that wasn't the right answer. But 74% of you say it's code signing. This is something that is based around the idea of a digital signature. Digital signatures are incredibly useful, not only to know that you're receiving something that has not changed since it has been sent to you, but you also know that it really did come from the person who says it came from. So there's some nice, what we call non-repudiation, that not only you can see that, but everyone else can see it as well. The idea of digital signatures have been included with the deployment of applications and integrated into your operating system. We refer to this type of digital signature as code signing. It's a code-based digital signature, and application developers use this all the time. You've probably seen this if you've installed an application inside of your Windows. You start installing the app and it says, this application was signed by Adobe. Do you want to continue installing this into your operating system? So you get to make the decision on whether that code is trusted. That is the foundation of IT security, by the way, is trust. Really, we can't 100% trust anything. There's just no way to do that and still maintain any type of security. So when you aren't trusting everything, you have to start making some decisions. And the message that comes up in this case says, well, we know it really did come from Adobe because they signed this code, and the only person who can sign that would be Adobe. They have certified that this is something that you should trust. If you trust Adobe, then you should be able to trust this code. That's the idea. In fact, that's pretty much how all of the encryption that we use in the internet works. If you trust these particular certificate authorities, then you can also trust that you're visiting ProfessorMesser.com. Is it a tenuous trust? Probably. It probably is. But it's effectively what we have today. It's sort of, we trust one entity, therefore we can trust this other entity that we don't necessarily know about. That's how we're able to make any of this work. In the world of code signing, it is a digital signature. So it's asymmetric encryption that is encrypting a hash of the code. If you're familiar at all and you've gone through our section of the Security Plus videos where I talk about digital signatures, it's effectively that process. So absolutely, that's what you would do. The code signing creates a hash of the code. It encrypts that hash. It encrypts it with the private key of the developer, and then they provide you with that particular digital signature. Then you undo it. When you receive it, you decode that encrypted hash. You look at the hash. You compare it to the hash that you took of the application. And if they match, you know nothing changed with that application, and it really came from Adobe in this particular case. That's also built into your operating system, by the way. Windows checks for these signatures when you are installing the application, so you don't have to worry about it. If something comes through and it doesn't match the digital signature, or it's a name popping up you don't recognize, you can stop the installation and nothing has been installed. No harm, no foul. So you get to make that decision as you go through it. Code signing is a very valuable tool in protecting yourself against any type of malware that someone might have embedded. Wouldn't that be a great thing to do? You grab the Adobe Acrobat executable, you put your own malware in it, and then you send it to a user. Well, because we do this code signing check, it will fail the code signing process if somebody tries that. And that's how we're able to keep the malware out of these systems, by doing exactly that. Something that's always important is to protect the integrity of these systems. And the only way we can do that if we have a way to check the code that's in it. So the code signing is exactly what we would use to make that happen. We had other choices that were here, though. We could have chosen. We had 10% of you that said input validation. Input validation is when you put something into an application and the application then checks that input to make sure that it's not going to cause problems on the back end. For example, if there's a field that's looking for a zip code and you put into that zip code some SQL injection and you send it to the server, if the server's not validating that input, it could potentially pass that SQL injection on into the application itself, and you may be able to access a database that normally you should not be able to. Input validation is a common security tool for the application developers, but often they kind of forget it. So that's a really good example of where you might run into those types of problems. So it would not be input validation. We're not validating input. We're trying to make sure we received the right code. We also have 8% that's in static code analysis. Static code analysis checks the code on the developer side, and we can run through different security scenarios and look for security problems just by having it examine the raw source code itself. When you receive an application, you don't get to see the source code in most cases. If it's coming from Adobe, if it's commercial software, you don't get to see that. So that's something you would not run into either. We also have full disk encryption. Full disk encryption is not something that comes with your application. Full disk encryption is something you do on your local machine to prevent somebody from gaining access to that data when you're not there. Very useful for mobile devices and laptops, for example, but it's not part of your application. And then only 1% of you said secure cookies. Secure cookies are the cookies that we store in our browser. They are secure cookies because we don't want other websites being able to gain access to cookies from another third-party website. So we refer to those as secure cookies. They are encrypted and they are private to that particular site. That is part of the browser itself. And in this case, 74% of you say code signing. That is the right answer. That's the one we were looking for. If you chose code signing, you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, we do have a lot of questions that we went through today. I want to give you one more, but instead of giving you one that I created for this study group, I want to share you a question from my practice exams book. One of the things I found when I started creating Security Plus courses, and I go back to the 401, I think was one of the first Security Plus courses I created. So this is 401, 501, 601. This is the fourth iteration of a Security Plus course that I published. One of the things I noticed, though, is that a lot of the questions for Security Plus, especially the ones on the internet, not that great. Not high quality questions. They don't seem to have the same tone as an actual exam. They are not as difficult as an actual exam. And in some cases, they're just wrong in their questions and their answers. I thought there must be a better way to present and to prepare people for their Security Plus exam. So I created my own book of practice questions. This is a set of 3 separate 90-question practice exams in the same format as the actual Security Plus exam. Not only that, I went through the process of understanding the tone, the style, the cadence of actual exam questions, and I applied those questions into this mix as well. These questions are designed to prepare you for the same method of writing, the same style and tone of questions that you might get on the actual exam. So if that's something that you might be interested in, you might want to have a look at some of these practice questions in my practice exams book. And again, you've got practice questions that you can get both in a digital form and in a physical form. You can see the digital form is what we're about to look at on our screen. In fact, I have the digital one. This is a question from this book on page 27. The question asks, it's question A81. And it asks, I can get rid of my magnifier there, which of the following describes a monetary loss if one event occurs? Is that an ALE, SLE, RTO, or ARO? Got a lot of different options there that we would choose from to be able to make that happen. Now, if you've been studying your acronyms and you know what some of these topics are, then you're already familiar with what these happen to be. Now, this is one that you would want to get an answer for. But since we're in a PDF, maybe you're on a tablet, maybe you're on a desktop like I am, you may want to annotate some of this. Maybe there are certain words that are in the document that you might want to highlight. Maybe there are different answers that you might want to choose or select in this mix. And one of the things you could do is just go to page 33 and see if it's A, B, C, or D. We call that a quick answer. You can see we're on page 27 right now. So we'd have to scroll through this mix to be able to know what the answers happen to be. But if you wanted a more detailed description of this particular answer, it's on page 119. Well, we'd really have to scroll through our book to get to page 119. But since it's a PDF, I put hyperlinks in here. We can simply click on the word "the details" and it takes us to page 119, just like that. So here's the question again: which the following describes monetary loss if one event occurs? ALE, SLE, RTO, and ARO. You can see the answer is B, SLE. And of course, in this exam, whenever you see an abbreviation, I always spell out that abbreviation in the answer to the question, which I think helps you with the memorization part of it. SLE is single loss expectancy. And of course, I give you the description of why the right answer is right. My problem with practice exams, though, is I never get the right answer right. I always choose the wrong answer, and I'm always left wondering, why was that the wrong answer? So in my practice exams book, every single incorrect answer is documented. So you will never see an incorrect answer and try to figure out, well, why is that incorrect? Well, I'll tell you why it's incorrect. This is why. I think that's an important part of the study process. How do I close that loop? How do I make it so that I've learned something when I get a question wrong? And unless you're documenting that information, you'll never know why you got the wrong answer wrong. I think also it's important, if you get the right answer right, I would highly recommend you go through and read the wrong answers, because on your exam, maybe you don't get a question about SLE, maybe you got a question about ARO. And if you didn't read through what ARO was, you'll never know what that happened to be when you get to your actual exam. Another advantage of having actual exam objectives as part of both the question and the answers. I think that's an important part of the learning process too. And if you're like me and you read through the question and you have no idea what any of these things are, you just are clueless about the whole idea of ALE, SLE, RTO, or ARO, at the bottom of this list is a link to the video that was used to create this question, so that you can go watch the video, get an understanding of SLE, ALE, RTO, and ARO, and then you can come back to the question and see if you understand the technologies then. That is all built into my practice exams book. This is available on my website. You can find it at professormesser.com/securitype, or simply use the menus at the top of the website to go to the Security Plus section. There's a list there for the practice exams book. And if you get the practice exams and the course notes at the same time, there's also a little bit of a financial benefit. There's a little bit of a discount built into that. Just another way that if you're wanting to help the website, I want to help you too and give you that for just a little bit less expensive than buying them individually. Something that might help you as you're going through this. Another piece of information that will really help you for this exam are the exam objectives themselves. I've spoken about the objectives on and on today. They are valuable. This is a copy of the objectives I've already downloaded. You can, in fact, I've made tons of notes in here. You can see my annotations are already in here. This is a fully documented, well-bulleted list of every possible thing that could be asked of you on the exam. That is a very important part of this, that if you know everything that's in this document, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these exam objectives in here, but if you know all of them, then you're ready for this exam. This makes a great checklist, by the way. And in the back, it even has an acronym list so that you can go through the big list of acronyms that are expected for the Security Plus exam. That's something that you need a little help with. There are a bunch of those in this list as well. So that is the exam objectives. That is the official set from CompTIA, and it's free. If you need to get those objectives, I have a link that will take you over to the CompTIA website. Go to professormesser.com/objectives, or you can simply go to your favorite search engine and type in CompTIA exam objectives, and it'll take you exactly to that point. Well, hopefully that's given you some perspective of some topics that you could choose from to be able to access and be able to know what will be expected for you on the exam. I think it also makes a very good form of checklist before you take your exam. So if you want to know, have I really studied everything? Grab these objectives. They will answer that question for you. Well, that is all the questions we had. I went a little bit over in time today. I hope that's okay. We went through a lot of questions today, but we're not done yet. We have an entire after show available. I've asked you questions for an hour. Now it's time for you to ask me some questions. If you want to ask those questions, you can use that same link. Go to professormesser.com/QA. There's a link at the very top where you could go and find where you can submit questions for our after show. Of course, you can always follow us. We have questions every week at professormesser.com/Twitter and /Instagram. And if you wanted to subscribe to our apparently very popular 1 million subscribed YouTube channel, we have one at professormesser.com/YouTube. Can you tell I'm proud? Something that happened yesterday is we hit the 1 million mark on the people who are subscribed to our YouTube channel. Thank you, all of you, for supporting our site, supporting what we're doing on the internet, supporting the idea of getting people trained in IT and other technologies, something that we're extremely proud of. We'd like you to join that YouTube channel too. It's at professormesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about the discounted vouchers on our site. You can find that at professormesser.com/vouchers for those of you in the US or Canada. And don't forget about the course notes, the practice exams, and our other study materials at professormesser.com/701SB. Well, that brings us to the end of our first hour. Stick around. Just stay right where you are. And seconds from now, we will begin our study group after show. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody. Let's push a few buttons on this side. Let's take a sip. And let's get back to the after show, everybody. I know the practice, the discounts that I have for the vouchers are currently only available for the folks in the US, Canada, or US territory. Nothing yet for the UK. Nothing yet for other areas yet. Got to figure out the details for that one to work myself around that one. We'll have to figure it out as we go. But now we get to have our after show. Now is the part of the show that you get to run effectively. Let me bring up on my screen what that is. It shows indeed this view that says that you can submit questions for the second half of the study group at any time. We'll be moderating questions here on the back end. I'll just be scanning through them as we go. So your contribution may not appear immediately, but if it's something we choose, you will certainly see that on the screen. And again, you just visit the same link we've been using this whole time. Go to professormesser.com/QA. We'll make that happen. So let's see if we can go through this list of questions that you have submitted. Oh, a lot of questions already waiting for me and breaking these out. So we'll start with a question from Mark. Mark asks, what are CompTIA stackable qualifications? You may not have even heard this before. These stackable qualifications from CompTIA. Well, this was something added not too far along, a couple years ago, not very long ago, are these stackable qualifications from CompTIA. And I think that CompTIA has really been trying to find ways to highlight when someone has more than one CompTIA cert. I mean, a lot of people have, for example, the A+, the Network Plus, and the Security Plus. They've kind of worked through a series of CompTIA certs. And CompTIA thought, well, it would be nice if we could combine those together and really show it as one single success that you have made. So they created what they call stackable certifications. The stackable certifications is when you combine multiple certifications together to have an umbrella cert for for 2 or 3 or multiples of these, if you will. So you certainly have that. For example, if you have the A+ certification and you have the Network Plus certification, You may not even realize it. You are a CompTIA IT Operations Specialist, or CIOS. If you have, let's do another one. Here's another one. Since we're doing security today, we can scroll down. If you have that triplicate, that trifecta of A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, you are a CompTIA Secure Infrastructure Specialist, or a CSIS. Okay, that's something useful, I guess, we can talk about. And you can see all the different stacks that they created for a lot of different combinations of different certifications. Now, is this something we can use? Is this good? Is it bad? What is it? Is it something useful? So far, this has not been a series of stackable terms that hiring managers tend to be aware of. And you don't tend to see the stackable version of this listed as a requirement in a job posting. The managers and organizations tend to individually specify certification. So they still say A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. They have that there. But there are ways that you could use this to at least make yourself look a little better. For example, on your resume, you might want to put that you are a CompTIA Secure Infrastructure Specialist of CSIS, but then I would highly recommend, I would almost require you to always also put that you have the CompTIA A+, the CompTIA Network Plus, and the CompTIA Security Plus. You still want to write those out on your resume. Please just don't say, oh, I'm a CompTIA Secure Infrastructure Specialist or CSIS. Okay, but do you have your Security Plus? Well, yeah, I just told you I'm a CompTIA Secure Infrastructure Specialist. Okay, I don't know if you have a Security Plus. That's the problem. That's the issue we run into. I think it's great for highlighting that we do have this umbrella certification. It's not unlike the certifications that are from Microsoft, for example. They're very good at taking multiple certifications, putting them together, and then at the very top, calling that a particular certification type. I think part of the problem, though, is there's so many different stacks that CompTIA has that you don't know which stack does what. They don't exactly describe the certifications that are underneath it. So that is a bit of a challenge that we can't really use the stackable certs for very much, but they are still there and you can still use them. Really, it's more for telling someone, I've worked on multiple certs. Here's the name of the stack, but here are the certs that I really worked on. So they are real. They are useful. They still exist, but I don't know if they're outside the scope of CompTIA or outside the scope of other industry professionals. I don't really know that it can help you when you're trying to get a job or get a better job. So always write out the specific cert that you earn so that it is listed in that document, in that resume. So many resumes are being automatically evaluated these days. They're being scanned by the robots and making determination on whether you have that cert, that I don't want you to put the stackable on your resume and somehow someone looking for Security Plus bypasses your resume because you didn't actually list out Security Plus. Don't run into that scenario. Let's do some more questions that you have submitted. Again, you can submit questions at any time using the link that's right here on the screen. Go to that link, professormesser.com/QA. I will be glad to take your questions. I don't know if I can hold your questions, but I could certainly take your questions from this list. Let's talk about this from Anonymous. Anonymous asks, let's get my screen into a place where we can actually see it. And this screen, finally, is where I'd like to see it. Anonymous asks, do you need to know different tools you can use for the Security Plus exam, such as Nessus, Sniper, tcpdump, NMap? What about those? Those sound great. In fact, those are very popular security tools. And if you, up to this point, had been working on the SY0-701 exam, then you probably were pretty familiar with those. But one of the things you may have noticed is on the SY0-701 exam, none of those tools are in there. They don't exist. They're just not there. The 601 exam and the 701 exam, very different from each other. They are very different exams. In fact, if you look at the 601, which in this Venn diagram is the big circle on the left, and the 701 exam, which is the smaller circle on the right, you can see there is a difference in size. These circles represent the total number of objectives on the exam. We looked at the exam objectives and we saw all those bullets. I counted all the bullets. I really did. I wrote down every single bullet, and then I compared every bullet in one exam to all of the bullets in the other exam to see what bullets were the same, what objectives were dropped, what objectives were duplicated, and then what objectives were new. And I put them into this diagram. And you can see the SY0-601 exam, it was a big exam. It was much bigger than the 501. And in fact, you'll see that there are over 1,000 objectives on the 601 exam. The 601 exam, by the way, it's now retired in the United States. We don't see the 601 exam anymore, so that's not an issue. The only exam we can take these days is the 701, and you can see 662 objectives on the 701. So it is, in fact, if you were to measure this, this is 1,034 pixels high. This is 662 pixels high. So this is to scale to each other, just so you can see that really was built that way. It's intentional. What's also interesting about this, if you had been studying that older version that had Sniper and NMap and those different tools, it's one of those that was exclusive or dropped in the 601. 710 objectives on this exam didn't make the jump over to the 701. Effectively, 70% of the objectives from the 601 version never appear in the 701 exam objectives. That's a lot. In fact, if you look, you can see half of the 701 exam are all brand new topics. So it's a smaller exam. So 338 of the objectives on the 701, brand new. If you did study the 601 exam, you will notice that about half of the questions on the 701, half of the objectives on the 701 are the same as objectives that were on the 601. But you can also see, because of the size of the 701, that's a relatively small number of objectives total coming from that 601 exam. Now, this is not normal, by the way, just for those of you who have kept up with the Security Plus exam through the years. The 401, the 501, the 601, the 701, I've been doing different iterations of the Security Plus exam for quite some time. Most of the time, the differences between the two are around 20 to 30%. Not much difference at all. Very rare and unusual to see half of the exam be new objectives. That's something you just don't run into. But I think what CompTIA was trying to do with this was to be able to take what used to be an exam of this size, because the 501 was about this size. And then they sort of made this big bloated version for the 601. And about that time, they started creating the CISA exam, the CASP exam, and they realized we need to kind of split the Security Plus exam back into a smaller, more manageable form. So I think this is a welcome change. The 701 is effectively now right-sized for what we are doing. And if you're someone who's working on these objectives, this is also, by the way, why I tell people, do not study for the 701 exam by using 601 study materials. I think you can see why that would be an awful idea. Not only would you be studying way too much that's not on the exam, you're going to be missing half of the content on the 701. That's just one of the things that happened because of the changes they made. So that is a very good example of why you have to pay attention to those exam versions and make sure that your study materials match those exam versions perfectly. And that's also why, back to Anonymous, who asked, what do I need to know these tools like Nessus, Sniper, tcpdump, and NMap? Well, for the Security Plus exam, all of these tools were dropped from the exam. That big section that's no longer in the new version, it's part of that section. So you do not need to know these tools. If you're looking through the 701 objectives, you say, I don't remember seeing Sniper. I don't remember seeing tcpdump in there. That's because they're not in there. They're no longer in the 701 exam. So when somebody says to you, nah, they really didn't change that much, you might want to go compare those two different exam objectives. They changed quite a bit between those two exams. Make sure you're super familiar. If you never did anything with the 601, none of that makes any sense to you anyway. None of that matters at all. But for those of you that were in the 601 days, you studied for that version, and maybe you had to make the jump over to 701, those are important statistics to know. Let's keep going through this list. We've got quite a few questions that have come in. This is a pretty good one. We're talking about security a lot today. So another question from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, with A+, Security Plus, and a couple years service desk experience, what next IT role would you recommend to work towards a security analyst position? Would it be sysadmin? Would it be networking? Would it be cloud? Yes. Yes to all of those. Here's how I approach the world of IT security. And this is probably an important consideration if you're getting into the world of IT security right now, or you would like to get into the world of IT security. I'm going to speak to you as someone who worked as a senior systems engineer for a next generation firewall company and worked and talked to thousands of different IT security professionals in hundreds and hundreds of some of the smallest and largest companies in the world. So I have at least some perspective as to the skills, the pathway, and the requirements for somebody who wants to get into the world of IT security. The real goal, and the thing I think that is important to talk about before we do that, you'll often see online that people will try to convince you that you need to earn a particular certification or get a particular formal education or do something that will then qualify you to work in IT security. And unfortunately, it does not work quite that way. In the world of IT security, there are no entry-level types of positions. And by entry-level, I mean somebody who's just getting into the world of IT. If you are just getting into the world of IT, there are very limited options for you when it comes to security. That's because IT security requires that you have a foundation of knowledge that deals not only with operating systems, but networking and with security topics. So you've got to do a lot of learning before you're ever qualified to work in an area dealing with IT security. So entry level in IT security is different than entry level into the world of IT. That's why you often see people say, my first job in IT was as a help desk person. My first role in IT was as a field service technician. So just to give you some perspective, you usually start with those jobs that are going to teach you the ropes. They're going to teach you about the hardware. You're going to learn about upgrading software. You're going to learn about some aspect of operating systems. Generally, it's Windows. So that's a very good example of where you might want to change your focus if your goal is ultimately to get into the world of security. So to answer the question from Anonymous, who asks, you've already got a couple years of service. You've been on the help desk, the service desk, you call it, which is help desk type work. You got an A+, you got a security plus. So what's next? Well, now we need to fill in the gaps. What else would we need to be ready to jump into the world of IT security? And I think there's really two major areas that I would recommend you focus on, really sort of three these days. But one of those is operating systems. You cannot secure an operating system unless you become an expert in how that operating system works. Not just at the security level, but generally how the operating system manages users. How does it manage permissions? How does it allow or disallow access into the operating system itself? Where does it store data? How does it store data? All of this information is incredibly important. And in the world of IT security, we also need to layer on top of that directory services, because that's a huge part of our operating systems, is understanding how directory services, either in your forest or multiple forests or multiple active directory implementations and different domains, how would you make all of those work with each other and still be secure? So there's many levels and layers of complexity on top of that, and we haven't even stopped talking about Windows yet. So not only is there Windows, now we have to do the same thing for Linux. Now we have to do the same thing for Mac OS. And what about our mobile devices? A completely different set of requirements to manage these. So I think a job getting a system administrator, server administrator, Linux administrator, Windows administrator, that is a great next step. It's a fantastic next step because you really do learn the foundational skills, information, and details required to become an expert in that operating system. And you will. This is something that's perfectly doable. We have that fear of the unknown in the world of technology. I certainly do anyway, where if I don't know something, it frightens me if somebody asks me to work on it. But then as I get into that technology, maybe I read the manual. I know, crazy. I read the manual. I watch some training videos. I go get a certification on that particular topic. Then when I sit down in front of that technology, now it's not scary at all. Now I'm very familiar with that technology. And I think to myself, why was I so worried? This is not as difficult as I thought it was. We always think it's more difficult than what we thought it was. So the more you learn, the less scared you become. And then you just get scared about something else that you don't know about later on. The process continues, the circle of life. And that brings us to the next thing that we might want to know, which would be networking. How does the network operate? What about these protocols? How is TCP different than UDP? How does IP operate? What about the applications we layer on top of it? Where does the encryption fit into all of these protocols? How do we have these VLANs connected to each other? Where is the tagging that takes place when you connect two switches together with .1Q? What about your static routing? What about your dynamic routing? What about route-based IPsec tunnels? What about SSL VPN connectivity? What about redundant firewalls? All of these are networking questions. We haven't even gotten into the security part of this yet. All of those things deal with a knowledge of networking that you must have to be able to secure the network. And again, it sounds complex and difficult, and in some cases it is complex, in some cases it is difficult, but it's learnable, it's doable, trust me. If I was able to learn it, trust me, you would be able to learn this. My formal degree is in business management. I do not have a formal degree in computer science. I don't do any type of programming or development, very little programming or development. I do a lot of work in scripting. I do tons of work in automation, because that's extremely powerful, and you will too. As you get into the world of IT, that's that third area that I wanted to mention here is the automation part of it. It sort of fits into the world of the cloud because the cloud really does rely, or it hopes for, a reliance on automation. It's very hard to manage a cloud manually. The cloud lends itself to be managed through automation. And the more you can learn about PowerShell, if you're in the Windows environment, the more you can learn about Python, if you're in every other environment, including Windows, really. And anything you can do with other scripting languages like batch files in Windows, shell scripts and learning maybe a little bit of Perl, maybe learning a little bit of JavaScript, nothing too crazy. You're not building applications. You're simply automating the process that occurs within the operating systems and applications you're using already. And it can be very, very powerful and very, very lucrative because that is a set of skills that unfortunately not a lot of people have. So now we build our foundation. Now we know and have become experts in operating systems, directory services, Linux, Windows, Mac OS. We're very comfortable with those particular operating systems. And we are very comfortable with the network. We now understand protocols. We can capture this information. We can read a Wireshark or a sniffer trace file. We can understand the conversations taking place. We can identify where problems may be occurring within that packet capture. We can evaluate response times and understand where slowdowns are occurring. We can see error messages happening with the application that aren't appearing on the screen, but they're appearing on the network. Trace files and networking, seeing the protocols tells you everything about everything. And once you become an expert in that piece, you're now got the best 1-2 punch of all. You've got the operating system and you've got the network. Now you're ready to learn about the security side of things. And you combine with that the automation that you've already learned, you're unstoppable. That is exactly the level you want to get to really become an expert in the world of IT security. So if you're somebody who wants to manage firewalls, manage the data and protect the data within your organization, set up the policies, make sure your intrusion prevention is set up properly, work with your SIM, sort through enormous amounts of big data. Big data is becoming a huge part of IT security. So there is a data aspect to this as well that's important. So all of that working together becomes super useful. So make sure you're familiar with it and you know where to go. And if you're wondering, I just got out of school, I got a degree in computer science or whatever it happens to be, and I put my resume in for an IT security role and no one's calling me back, that's probably to be expected. Now, I will say, and I always get your emails once I have a conversation like this on my live streams, is people always send a message in saying, well, you're wrong because I got out of school and I got a job in security, so you are wrong. Well, there actually are positions out there that are not just entry level into security, but entry level into IT that have a security slant to them. I wouldn't necessarily call it an IT security position, but if you're in a very large geographical area, you're in a big city, and a lot of the companies in that city may have operations centers. We often think of this operations centers as people that are working in network operations centers. And you've probably seen pictures of these. They're big rooms. They have these big monitors up, and you can see where all the network diagrams are up there. You can see everything's green. Maybe there's a red here and there. Maybe they've also got a map showing all of the storms. You've got a satellite view of the weather that's in your particular area or where your locations happen to be, because that tends to be an important part of monitoring a network, is knowing where the storms are, interestingly enough. Well, that's for network operations center. These same companies may also have a security operations center. They're a big enough company. You need that same type of visibility into what's happening with security in our environment. Are there alarms going off from a security perspective? Are there authentication issues occurring in a particular place? Do we need to start deploying different certificates to a server? Do we need to handle the renewals? Is there a problem with our automated processes dealing with security? Those are important as well. And when you're working as sort of that entry level in a security operations center or a SOC, then you're probably, it's in many ways the help desk for security. You can think of it that way. You're still at the help desk. You're still at that entry level, but at least the topics you're dealing with are almost 100% focused on security. So it's IAM, it's encryption, it's certificates, it's issues with vulnerabilities, it's patching, it's the things you would expect in the world of IT security. And you're just focusing on those things. Now, the help desk position you have might already have some aspect of that. If you don't have a SOC, that falls to the normal service desk to be able to handle those. So there might be some of that you can already leverage. But I would ideally tell you that where you want to go is to build the foundation of operating systems, put in there some networking, a little bit of scripting, maybe a little bit of cloud in there, might help you a little bit too. But add up all of those, your stack of knowledge will be different than other people's stack of knowledge. And make sure that you're familiar with what might be expected of a security professional in your area. And if you do that, you will be ready for an IT security position. Hopefully that gives you some perspective on where you might want to focus and work towards if you want to get into a service type of role in the world of IT security. Let's do another question. I'm going to sort through the list of the, here we go. Sort through the list. I think we got more that we can get through. Thank you so much for submitting these. If you'd like to submit a question, you can submit it by going to the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and we will work through whatever questions you have there. We've got a lot to go through. Let's see if we can go through some others. Some good questions. We talked about some of these already, so I apologize if I'm sort of passing by your question, but that's certainly something that that if we've covered it, we don't need to go through that one again. Other questions. This is a good one. I showed these acronyms earlier. Josh asks, Okay, when do I start memorizing that big list of acronyms? Do you go through all the videos first, or do you go through the acronym list first? And I think there's a balancing act here. And I think what we should do is maybe look at this list of acronyms. Let's see if we can do that on my screen. I have these here. The acronyms are listed in the back of the official exam objectives. And on this objectives, we went through this before and we looked at all of the different individual bullets, those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of objectives that you need to know. But in the very back of the book of this guide is the CompTIA Security Plus SY0-701 acronym list. I will say overall, this is a pretty good list. It really does summarize the most popular acronyms that are associated with the exam objectives that are listed. By themselves, they are not individual objectives. And in fact, what I tend to tell people is watch the course first. I don't tell you an acronym in the course and not explain what that acronym is. So we always tend to talk about these acronyms. And I think most of these you will learn organically as you go through the videos, you go through your book, maybe you do some labs, you'll start to understand what those acronyms are. In fact, you'll start using the acronym and you'll stop remembering what the words are, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it might be a challenge on your exam if you run into somebody using the words and not using the acronym, or vice versa. But let's look at a couple of these. I'm going to kind of get rid of this on the screen for now so we can see it. For example, AES means Advanced Encryption Standard. We run across the AES protocol for encryption all the time, the wireless networks, normal encryption that we would use for full disk encryption. A lot of technologies use AES. So it's useful to know that AES is Advanced Encryption Standard. That by itself doesn't really tell you a lot more about AES. What you want to do is really, as I just mentioned, we know what AES is. We know the words Advanced Encryption Standard, but I highly recommend you also include in this, what does that do for you? What does this technology bring to the table? How do we deploy this technology? Where would we find this technology? So AES is a good example of an acronym that on its own doesn't tell you a lot. But if you are able to put it in context, then you're probably good with that particular acronym. There are some acronyms in this list I don't necessarily know are fantastic things to know, but the vast majority of them are. It's hard to even find one right now that would not apply to the existing set of exam objectives. They are all pretty spot on. Everything from a DLL, DLP we even talked about today, DMARC, yep, that's legit. You don't often see DNAT listed this way. That's certainly not part of the exam objectives. It would probably be better for the Network Plus exam. Network address translation, we're certainly familiar with. And a DNAT, a destination network address translation, is a common use of NAT, a common use of the NAT name, but not necessarily something that would really apply for the Security Plus exam objective. So occasionally you will see an acronym thrown into this list that doesn't necessarily directly fit back to the objectives, but broadly speaking, it is certainly part of it. But there's a lot. Look at all these acronyms listed in here, but at least they tell you what these acronyms are. It's just that some of these may not make a lot of sense for the current version. And what I've found is sometimes they leave in acronyms that were talked about in the previous version of the exam, and they didn't remove them in this acronym list. That doesn't necessarily make it a bad acronym to know, but it may not directly apply back to an existing exam objective. You just don't know that until you go through all of them, though. So I say you should eventually, you will know all of these just because you studied the exam objectives. You've studied the videos, you read the book. You probably already know 85% of these just by doing that. The extra 15%, you may have to go through and just have a look at what they are. You will not get questions on your exam, however, that ask, what does OCSP stand for? OCSP, that's Online Certificate Status Protocol. You're never going to get a question like that on your exam. So if all your flashcards have is on one side, it has an acronym, an initial, and on the other side are the words, that's a relatively pointless exercise. You want to include on the other side of the flashcard, what does this do for me? How is this useful? Where would I see this? How is it deployed? That is how you would really enhance the capability of these particular flashcards. And that's what I would recommend you do when it comes to the world of managing flashcards and memorizing all of these different acronyms that you would run into. So pretty important. That's have a look at those, see if that works for you. I think most of these you're just going to learn automatically, organically as you go through the exam materials. We have time for more questions. Let's keep going through this list. This is more of a question from my website where Josh asks, I want the paperback copies, but I want the audio and the exam hacks book. Some of you have already seen when you go to my site, the success bundle that I have is a digital product, but sometimes you might want the physical exam hacks or the physical course notes and the physical practice exams. And that's kind of nice. Some people like to carry these around. So you've got now the course notes and you can flip through the course notes wherever you happen to be. You don't have to be connected to the internet. It's a little easier to read. It's a little more comfortable for a number of people, but I don't have a combination practice, a combination of success bundle physical books. I need to add a little tick mark in there that says, if you want physical books, add on this much and I'll send these to you as well. I don't really have that for you. All I have is sort of the physical books and that's it. So I need to do a better job on my site of giving you that option. I don't currently do that. However, if you would like that option, when you purchase the success bundle, just open a ticket in your member or send me a direct message through the contact us list on the site and say, hey, I want to pay the difference. I just want an upgrade to, I have the success bundle. I just want to get the physical books and I'll discount the $50 for the digital version. And you can apply that. I'll have a coupon for you that applies it towards the physical version. Did I say that right? I'll give you the $50 discount on the digital version that you've purchased as part of the success bundle. You effectively get $50 off the physical version. And then it'll process it and it'll send it off to you. Have a whole process automatically. They are printed on demand and shipped out to you. If you are in Canada, I'm shipping other ways around the Canada Post issues you're having up there right now. So hopefully it will still get to you okay. Yeah, I've had to increase the cost of shipping to Canada, at least temporarily here, because I'm having to go around Canada Post. And unfortunately, everybody outside of Canada Post costs more to ship, sort of the plan. So I think everything is being shipped now FedEx. I may be using other methods. The provider, the folks that are printing these for me, pick the best way to get it to you. I just make sure that I'm able to give you the right pricing on the shipping. Hopefully that whole mess will be over very soon. We won't have to worry about it. So yeah, just send me a note. I'll send you the coupon, the instructions for using the coupon, and you can simply go from there. I'm sorry that it's that extra step right now. That's my fault. I've just got to do a better job at setting up my website. If any of you have ever talked to me about setting up a website, you know I don't do a very good job at it, but I'm getting there. I've got people helping now. So I promise there will be some tweaks and updates. I have a great 2025 planned. It'll be a lot of fun. So there are things I can do to fix and make things a little bit better for you. And I am working on it. So thank you. I appreciate your patience with me. Let's keep going through this list. I know we're sort of at the top of the hour, but we've got more on this list we can pull from. Have that there. By the way, there's a tab at the top of the page where you can choose between the digital edition and the physical edition. So the digital edition is the PDF. The physical edition is the printed book, is the Dead Tree version. So you get to choose which one we have there. And I don't mind the Dead Tree version. I used to live in a part of the state of Florida where we had a lot of pine trees. We do a lot of printing of paper, creating of paper there. So I'm more than happy to create more paper. There's no problem making more paper. We'll just grow more trees. And if you like paper, you shouldn't feel bad about it. That's a great thing to use. Let's keep going in this list. We got more to pull from. So let's keep going. Oh, this is some pretty good ones in this list. Thank you, by the way, for sending these in. Some of these are very funny. Some of these are questions I can't share with you. So one day we can sit around the bar and have a beer and I'll tell you all about the questions I get. But in the meantime, we're just going to scroll past a number of those that are on the list. There is a question in here. I'm not even going to put it up because we were sort of talking about it already. Do I recommend the physical edition over the digital edition? These are identical. So let me show you. We'll get a page here where I'm showing the Diffie-Hellman. We're showing how we would do key exchange or create a key based on this. Kind of hard to see with the blurriness that we have there. So this is just a page out of the practice, out of my course notes that has that particular diagrams on it. Well, if you were to look at the digital version, so look up here, there it is, that version right here of the Diffie-Hellman that we have there. Hard to see in that view, a little easier to see in this view. So it's exactly the same. I mean, the layout is exactly the same. It's designed that way. So if you get the digital version, it's identical to the physical version. The content, the layout, you can find things very easily. So absolutely, you can make that happen on yours. If you have the physical version, it's just in a different format. It's just that easy to carry around. You don't need an internet connection kind of format to be able to use. That's really the only difference in those two things. So it's not like one of them has more content, the other one doesn't. Nope, they're exactly the same as far as content is concerned. It's all about delivery. It's all about how you use it. It's all about what's comfortable to you. You find the form that works for you, and that works. That's all we're really focusing on. I did not necessarily want to create a physical book version. Myself and Mrs. Professor Messer were talking about this last night, is that she's the one that says, I love holding a book. I like reading a book. I like the idea of touching the pages and flipping through the pages. I'm more of a computer guy. I used to travel a lot on planes. I don't want a book. It just weighs me down. It gets in the way. I lose it. I want a digital version. And she convinced me, no, you should do both and make it so people can get both. Like I said, yes, ma'am. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And she was right. As usual, she was absolutely correct. So now you have the choice. You can do either one. I think that's the best of both worlds on that one. This comes up quite a bit. This question again from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, what's the best way to read the questions on the exam, as the wording can be extremely tricky? I hope I said that in the right way, Anonymous. I don't find the exam questions to be tricky at all. The questions themselves on the exam are very straightforward. And if you have a question and it's asking for a particular thing, if you know the content, the answer will just pop right out. You'll see it immediately. It will be really obvious what the right answer happens to be. I don't find that the questions are vague. If anything, the questions on the exam are very focused on what answer you should be shooting for. And I don't find them tricky either. I think that's kind of a bad word to use for questions anyway, because I think a lot of people use the term tricky to describe, I didn't know what the answer was, therefore it was tricky. But all that really was is, I didn't study enough, so now I don't know the answer. That's not a trick. The trick there is you should study more so that that doesn't become an issue. Where I see a trick question is that this is a blue room with a blue door and the sky is blue and the ocean is blue. And what color is it at night? You know, like they're trying to convince you to answer blue. It's blue. It's color at night. No, it's black at night. There's no color at night. What color is the sun? It's blue. No, that's a trick. If they're trying to hide the answer, if they're trying to make the question convoluted or make it so that it has the word not in it, which by the way, the exam doesn't do the things like that. I found the exam questions to be very straightforward, to be very focused. Most of the questions on the exam tend to be 2 sentences in length. I've done quite a bit of work on this, where it sets up the question. It gives you what the actual question that you need to answer. And then the 4 answers that are listed on the exam are very clear and very specific and match exactly to the question that's being asked. I don't find the questions are hard to read. I don't find them to have an issue with grammar. They don't have one. Now, it hasn't always been that way. For those of you that are looking at me sideways, you may be thinking about previous versions of the exam. There were exams back in the day. This is many versions ago, where I think some of the questions were a little convoluted in their scope. They had like 4 sentences. A security administrator is working on this. They work through the problem and deal with that. They contact an associate where they describe this problem. The associate describes maybe perhaps they should do something else. What should the person finally do? You had to go all the way around this big paragraph. I described, I think it was the 601 version, maybe the previous to that, the 501 version. Some people would describe as a reading exercise. Reading comprehension exam is what a lot of people would have. I don't think they were necessarily wrong on that one. What CompTIA did on the 601 is they pared it back so that each question could maybe only tops have 3 sentences in it. And what they did on the latest version is they made it even smaller. So it's hard to find a question on the new exam that's more than 2 sentences long. I think that is by design. I think they intentionally saw the challenges, understood the issues, wanted to get more content into the exam. And because of that, they also worked through the process of how can we make the questions short enough so that we can fit more content on the exam. So I think they're trying different things all the time. And I think what we have today is a very good version of the exam. I don't think the wording is tricky. I think it's relatively straightforward. I also don't find it to be difficult to understand. They're very well written questions. They are with proper grammar. And if you know the content of the exam objectives, it will be relatively straightforward as to what they are asking for and what the possible answers are. The actual correct answer should just pop right off the screen. You should see it very clearly if you are taking that exam. I think that's a thing of the past. So don't worry so much about, am I going to need to understand how to decipher English? You know, if you're an English speaking person, you're not going to have a problem on that exam at all. If you're not an English speaking person, I think just the topics themselves can be complex, and that itself can be difficult to read. If you are in a country and you are taking a version of the exam that is not in, let me make sure I say this right. There are certain scenarios where if you are in a country and the language of the exam is different than that country, they give you extra time. And there are some instances even, and there's a section on the CompTIA website where you can ask if you can get extra time because English is a second language for you. That only works in certain countries with certain scenarios, and I'm probably shouldn't have mentioned it at all because it's so niche, but it might apply to you. So go have a look in your country and see if it might apply. The CompTIA website, you're looking for test accommodation, English as a second language, or just language. I think test accommodation language should find you what you are indeed looking for. Let's see other questions. Oh, let's start a fight. Shall we? I love a good fight. Who doesn't? This question, you're not starting a fight. You're okay. The question is, which is more secure, Windows or Mac OS? Is a Mac OS server machine the same as a Windows server machine? Are these both as secure as each other? What is the thing? Well, I think we all know that Windows is so much secure than anything else. Why would you even bother with Mac OS? What I meant to say was, I think we all know that Mac OS is so much more secure than Windows. Why would you deal with Windows? Actually, what I meant to say was Linux is so much more secure than anything else. Why would you deal with either Mac OS or Windows? The answer is neither of these have any level of security at all. They're all just as insecure as each other. Not one is better than the other. There are very bad vulnerabilities in all of these operating systems from time to time. There are patches in all of these operating systems that come out constantly, and the applications running on top of the operating systems also have security concerns that could ultimately allow people access to the operating system underneath. So the challenge you have in the world of security is we can all sit around and yell at each other over ours is better than yours, is yours is not as good as ours. But the answer is everything has a potential for being ridiculously insecure. Having worked for a next generation firewall company and not really having a dog in the hunt with operating systems, I have seen Linux, Mac OS, and Windows be horribly insecure. And there have been instances where all of those operating systems have been just really, really, really bad in their security implementations, security vulnerabilities, and certainly with Windows, Mac OS, and Linux right now in those operating systems, there is a really bad security vulnerability somewhere. We just haven't found it yet, but someone will. And you will see the news report. You will get your weekly update from SANS.org telling you about that horrible vulnerability that came through. And these things happen from time to time. Whether it is a vulnerability that came in through a third party, it's our supply chain. We've certainly seen that over the last year or so. Whether it's a problem with a particular application or service that is running that creates a huge hole in security, we've seen those as well. So you never know when it is going to happen, but trust me when I tell you, there are engineers, developers, people everywhere that are trying to find the next big vulnerability. Sometimes they tell us about it. Sometimes they don't. Imagine if you're a government and you identify a glaring security hole in Windows. Do you tell anybody about it? This would give you access effectively to every Windows machine in the world, including the Windows machines being used by your enemies. Do you tell anyone? This is the challenge we run into. There's an ethical issue that certainly needs to be addressed there. There's also a technological issue and a security issue that has to be addressed. So there you run into a little bit of a challenge when it comes to understanding how secure is an operating system and how much do we trust these operating systems to maintain that security? That's a different set of questions. We don't have even enough time to go through that today. So that's an excellent question to ask, by the way. Which one of these OSs is more secure? The answer is none of them are. You should treat them as if none of them ever will be. You should make all of your security plans along the perspective of this is eventually going to be a problem. How do I protect myself if it does? The answer is you need to increase my budget. Is what that ultimately runs into, which brings up a whole different set of problems. So that's the challenge. Let's keep going through this list. I think this might be, see what other ones we have here. There's so many good questions here, and we're at the end of our time. A lot of these will take so much time to go through and sort of take us down a different line of work that I just can't roll back to them quite yet. This is a good one. Here's a great one, by the way. Beats all the other ones that I just passed by. Zyver, who asks, I have no work experience. I've got Security Plus recently. Do you think a Blue Team Level 1 is a good certification to get hands-on experience? And let me expand on this and say that with some organizations, they do have those relatively entry-level security positions available. I mentioned earlier the Security Operations Center. And let's say you've got your Security Plus, you've kind of been working up to this level, you've got a good bit of knowledge, you've worked on operating systems for a while, you've learned a bit of networking, and they're willing to put you in kind of this entry-level blue team role. Is that something you should do? The answer is absolutely. If IT security is interesting to you, then you should try to get into that world as quickly as you can. That doesn't mean it's going to be quick, but as quickly as you're able to. I speak, as I mentioned, as someone who worked in the world of IT security that talked to hundreds of companies and thousands of individuals that dealt with security on a day-to-day basis for their organizations. These are companies you've absolutely heard of, logos you've seen, stores that you've been in, and even some that you haven't. So all of them focus on understanding the fundamentals of protecting your network. That's what your blue team is. You are the first line of defense. And because of that, there's a number of different strategies that you use. You don't just have any one thing, of course. You have a layered approach to security. You, of course, have a firewall, but you also need intrusion prevention, but you also need protection on individual devices, but you also need a way to manage those devices. And you need a way to make sure that you can identify when that device has been compromised. And you need all of these things build on each other. It's a huge part of it. But if you're able to find a position out there that is just sort of an entry level, it just gets you into the outside of this enormous world of IT security. If you have any interest in security, you should absolutely go for that. It is, well, first, I'm speaking from a kind of a biased perspective since I worked in that for so long. I loved IT security. But I really loved networking as well. I really liked working with operating systems. I think when you're learning, everything is exciting. When you go through the workday and you just learn something new about the operating system, you just learn something new about the security, you suddenly understand the way that protocol operates. You're able to capture that data and solve that problem. Those are great days. You're becoming more knowledgeable. You're becoming someone who is becoming more of an expert in that particular line of work. And you're someone who now can use that knowledge to position you up and level you up in the industry. And that's what we're trying to do, is get you the foundation that is strong enough that you could stand on to get into that world of security. Now, you could spend the rest of your career networking and that's a perfectly reasonable place to be as well. But if you are at all interested in security, I would highly encourage you to get that first position in security. It's really hard to get that first position. It's really hard to get that entry level into security. But once you are there, now you start learning the terms, the nomenclature of security. You start seeing the back and forth. You start getting a lay of the land, understanding the technologies that are in play, how they interact with each other, how your organization uses those technologies. That in itself is enough to move you up to the next level. So don't try to dismiss anything. If at all possible, even talk to the people that are in your security department now and ask them, hey, if I ever want to get to a point where I'm doing what you're doing, what do you recommend I do right now? They might say, go get one of these blue team certs. They might say, we do a ton of work with a Palo Alto Networks firewall. You need to go get Palo Alto Networks certified. They may say, well, we do so much cloud security. You need to go get this cloud security certification. It just depends on every organization, and every organization wildly different when it comes to security. Like most things in IT, there are some things that are fundamental. Everybody has a firewall, but not everybody implements their firewall in the same way. Not everybody has the same configuration for the firewall or even the same emphasis on what they want to block and what they want to allow. So just saying, yeah, everybody has a firewall isn't enough. You have to be able to understand, what is our philosophy for having a firewall? What are we trying to do with that firewall? Sometimes an organization knows, sometimes they don't, which is a little scary sometimes. But I've seen everything in my career, from organizations that were top-notch in security to organizations that were just happy to get through the day without everything catching on fire. And I can't say that the folks that were running things a little fast and a little loose were in a good place, but at least they had some of the fundamentals in place and could hold off a lot of the bigger problems. I have been in organizations, though, where I've walked in and talked about our technology, and they've looked at us and sort of sneered at us a little bit and said, why do you think that we're not good at security, bringing in your firewall here? We don't need your firewall. We know what we're doing. Your firewall is just a little plaything, and I can't believe you think it would apply here in our big old company. I'm like, well, okay, really sorry that meeting didn't work out. That was a little defeating. You walk out of those meetings just like, what just happened? Were we hit by a truck? Was not ready for that. But some organizations have that as their sort of internal culture, is one of that. Turns out that organization, not a month later, huge security breach, credit card numbers everywhere, thousands and thousands of problems, huge amounts of dollars. And ultimately, a lot of the people that we were in the meeting talking to, months after that, were no longer working for that organization. So sometimes these things that we talk about in the industry and that we see can sometimes work against you. You should, I think throughout my career, my watchword is always just to be humble. I know that I don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. But when you find somebody in IT who acts like they do know everything, you should be especially interested in watching what goes on next, because I guarantee you something is about to happen. I don't know what that is yet, but every time that has occurred, every time I have found this person, every time I have talked to that person in an organization, something has always happened. And I always have a story to go along with it next time, like the one I just told you of being thrown out of a building ultimately, and then finding out that their security was not what they were saying. It's sort of like poker, isn't it? With poker, someone who acts like they have a really strong hand never has a strong hand. Strong is weak and weak is strong. And it seems not just poker, that seems to be humans a lot of times. You have to kind of watch out for that. So don't be the one who is willing to act like you know everything. I have found that if you act as someone who wants to learn everything, that of course naturally means you don't know everything, but it's not a position of weakness. That's your position of strength. Learning is the secret sauce in everything that we do in IT. And if you spend your career constantly learning, constantly being curious, and constantly solving these puzzles that we get every single day, you will not only become more successful in your position, you'll make more money, you'll be able to support your family better, and it's a more fun place to work when you're actually going through this growing process every single day. There's always something interesting to see in IT. There's always something to learn. Nobody knows everything. Well, I think that's probably the best place we could stop right now. It's just because we've run out of time, and eventually I'll run out of voice. We don't want that either. I want to thank all of you, by the way, because this is our last study group of the year, of the calendar year. You'll notice I kind of crammed all of our study groups into the first half of December, leaving the last half of December available for myself and our employees here to be able to enjoy ourselves and relax a little bit. Thank you so much for joining us on this absolutely crazy year. And multiple years that have brought us to where we are. How appropriate that we hit that 1 million subscriber mark on YouTube here at the end of the year. I feel like we can really enjoy these holidays because of that. But don't think for a second that we don't know where that came from. We didn't make these 1 million subscribers out of thin air. Those are actual people that have visited our YouTube channel, that have thought enough of it to subscribe to that. And I don't take any of that lightly. That is a huge thing to us, and we sure appreciate it. Thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you for all of the support that you've provided, both through the things that we do on our website and for joining us for these live streams, because ultimately we can't do any of this without you. So we sure appreciate everything you've done for us this year, and we're planning great things for 2025. We hope you join us for all of the things that are to come as well. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for joining us for this study group. We got a lot more in 2025. We will see you in January. Have a fantastic holiday season. Have a great new year, and we'll talk to you in 2025. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone.